Hi and welcome back. Today I'm going to be painting this beautiful semi-abstract bluebell painting. It's taken from several photographs from Pixabay. The reference photographs will be linked below. What I did was I have combined the various photographs of bluebell stems and drawn them out onto my page and then masked them over with masking fluid. I've allowed it to dry and now I'm going to go over the whole page with a large brush, wetting some parts and leaving others dry. This is so that I can get a nice sort of random wash as a background for my flowers. My board's at an angle of about 45 degrees, so the paint will run. It's taped to my board with ordinary decorator's masking tape and it's Saunders Waterford cold pressed. This is really rich tube consistency, cobalt violet deep hue and sepia, just sort of slapped onto the board any old how, but sort of in slightly sort of shallow diagonal directions over the masking fluid, and you can see that the masking fluid is protecting my flower shapes really nicely, enabling me to freely slap the paint on and then spray with a misting spray. And because of the angle of my board, the water is now running down the page, softening out those what seemed like really heavy-handed paint marks, and now it's all softening gently and running down the page and diffusing really beautifully. And as soon as the wash looks the way I want it to, I'll lay my board flat on the table and then spatter in some more of this cobalt violet deep hue into the wet paint. And you can see that those little spatters of paint are blossoming out and blending into the paint. So now I shall leave that to dry completely. And once it's dry, we can continue building up the layers. So here it is, it's completely dry, and I'm going to use my misting spray and spray the bottom left corner just to wet that up again. And you can see I've lifted my board again to 45 degrees, so I'll get that lovely run of paint. And now this is perylene green with a little bit of cadmium yellow mixed in with it, and I'm using my Polina Bright synthetic round brush to pull up those kind of long curved thin leaves that bluebells naturally have. Because I wet the page with the water spray, you can see that those leaf shapes are diffusing into the wet areas, so this is kind of giving me that kind of softer look. And as that area dries, I can pull in some stronger, richer mixtures of paint doing exactly the same sort of shapes, soften them back if they go in a little bit too hard with the misting spray, and this way these will all soften and lighten as they dry, and it should give me a nice effect of loose leaves around my bluebells when I come to paint them. And then using the corner of a store card, I'm going to scrape that through in the same angle to create some lighter shapes, where I push the paint away with the corner of the card or pull it away to reveal the white paper underneath, and then the wet paint will sort of run back into the areas and soften off a bit, but it adds even more texture and tone very quickly and very loosely to that area. Just a little bit of spatter now with the violet, and using my fan brush I get a nice even distribution of spatter, and where it falls onto the dry paper I just get my nice little hard dots. Where it falls onto the wet paper, it'll begin to diffuse out and just intensify the purple glow a little bit more. And now again I'm going to leave it to dry completely and then come back and work on the bluebells. So it's completely dry and I have raise my board again to 45 degrees, and I shall rub off all the masking fluid with a clean finger, or I can use an eraser, and then brush off any of the crumbs of latex from the masking fluid off the painting. And you can see how pretty my bluebells look. I'm tempted to leave them like that, and you could, if you're following along with this tutorial, just leave them like that and making a very sort of impressionistic abstract flower painting. But for the sake of the tutorial, I'm just going to start to paint them in. And I'm just going to be using the same colours, but this time I'm going to be adding some ultramarine blue to the mix, just to give that subtle purpley violet blue that we get with bluebells. First I'm going to paint in the stems, and I'm using a bit of perylene green and a bit of cadmium yellow, and I'm lightly going over the stems with my small calligraphy brush, just dropping in sort of a bit more perylene green where I want it darker, a bit more cadmium yellow any areas that I want to keep nice and light. And now I'm going to paint in my bluebells. So I'm using, again, my small calligraphy brush, and I'm dropping water and very pale paint into the flowers first. I want to try and keep a few little white strips here and there just to add a bit of light to my flowers. But I want some gently diffused violets and blues, and to sort of have some darker shadowy areas and lighter areas where the sun is sort of hitting the flowers. So I'm just working across the flowers, starting with the palest shades and then gently dropping in darker and darker and slightly varying the hues from purple to blue in the bluebells until I will eventually, hopefully, be able to build up a nice, loose, impressionistic flower. So you can see I don't really mind where I put my blues and my violets too much, just as long as I get them to show up against my background. Ideally, perhaps my background should have been a little bit paler, but I shall bear that in mind next time I am painting a similar scene. So I'm almost there. I'm going to emphasise the blue a little bit more so that it contrasts more strongly against the violet background. But I quite like how subtly this is turning out. I'm really enjoying painting it, and it's taught me a lot. So now I've laid it flat and I am spattering, but this time I'm spattering with a little bit of white gouache. The white gouache will dry back a lot paler and hardly notice, but it just gives me a few little highlights and I think lifts the painting a little bit. So now it's really just a few finishing touches before I remove the tape, and one of the things I'm going to do is let the spatter dry, and then I'm going to use my Polina Bright and carefully add a few more slightly bolder leaves with the mixture of cadmium yellow and perylene green. Not much, but just enough to bring that bottom corner to life a bit more. And then just a last bit of violet spatter across that top right plain area, just to get a bit of tonal variation in there, and then leave that to dry, and that's going to be the painting pretty much finished. So here it is, and it's dried beautifully. It's a bit brighter than this in real life. I'll show you a more authentic photograph of how it looks at the end, but now you can see I've taken off the tape and I'm really happy with the way the painting has turned out. It really does look like a little corner of a wild wood with these beautiful bluebells just blooming in this kind of really interesting semi-abstract background. So here's a photograph showing you how the blooms look in real life and not being sun bleached in my studio, and I hope you'll agree that it works really nicely for this semi-abstract bluebell painting. Although I do think that it would probably be better if I'd kept my background slightly paler, but that's all part of the learning process. If my background was paler, my bluebells would stand out more, but I'm still quite happy with it like this, and next time I paint I shall bear that in mind. Well, I hope that was helpful, and please leave us a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thank you so much to my lovely Patreon group who support this channel. And I'll see you again soon, and happy painting. Bye.